What's good, world? It's your boy Patrick Okocha here, aka Stan Pat, and I'm here for a second edition of my interview series with what I refer to as the Queen Triplets. I had a previous interview earlier with Sophia Price and Helen Hamilton, and just the level of brevity in that conversation was something that was just really enriching. So if you haven't got the opportunity to listen or watch it, I really sort of really suggest or really promote the work that they're doing. So please check that out. But I'm also happy and super excited to present the third part of the Queen Triplet, and that's Bri Shannon, a woman who I've got the opportunity to know over the past 2 years, who has really just sort of been a star in her own right, in her own respect, and the moves that she's made, not only through Microsoft, but the work that she's been doing in the community, and it's been just very apparent. And I've been able to sort of see her leadership from the instant that I came across her at the program Year Up. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and really highlighting the work of this young woman. So Brianna, we'll just sort of get started. I just want to again thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to interview and meet with me. And I'd just like to sort of begin from the start. First, how did you get involved with Year Up, and ultimately what influenced your decision to join that program?
Yeah. Well, one, let me just back up and say first, I would be remiss if I didn't want to say thank you for having me. I have been a fan of your work, and you know that, Pat, since the minute we met at Europe. I have been a fan. Your personal mission, your personal walk, and you just as a human are spectacular. So I'm honored to be your friend. I'm honored to be a part of this. It's so necessary what you're doing, and I'm just happy to be here. Yes, hello everyone. As far as like a really quick introduction, and then I'll jump into kind of how we kind of crossed paths and got involved at Europe. Again, my name is Bri Shannon. I am Seattle born and raised through and through. I am currently working at Microsoft as a software engineer program manager. I also serve as my organization's diversity and inclusion lead for a much larger initiative that really looks to promote greater learning opportunities for our employee network. And then outside of that, I am the founder of Bri's Busy Bees, a nonprofit dedicated to mentorship, community outreach, scholarship, and really to just serve the underserved communities and our youth within Seattle. And then by night, I am a student in business and CS and information assurance. So how I got involved with Europe, really how our stars aligned. It's been an interesting journey. Like I said, you know my story, but I used to live in California. After graduating high school in Washington, I decided to continue my education and go to California. And the idea was for me to obviously study business, but I was very much back in that time focused on, I just need to find a path. And I've seen people doing this path. It looks like it's working. Let me just go ahead and do that. So I got involved in finance, actually. I took a job in finance. I first started off as a receptionist, and I started pretty much doing all the forecasting, all the logging. And it didn't take long for me to realize that I hated it and I didn't like it. It didn't fulfill me. And then I ran into some situations with family, and it was ultimately the decision for me to end up going back to Seattle. But I knew for me, I didn't want to just go back home and fall into somewhat of the trap that I had just got out of, and the reason why I left. So I wanted to be intentional, and I wanted to go back with a plan. So one of my best friends told me about the Europe program, and told me about all the fantastic things that was going on. And I had heard about it once or twice, but as you know, Pat, a lot of people, when they hear about Europe, they think it's a scam, it's a fraud, you're gonna pay me to go to school, all this stuff. All of it, I was thinking. But the more I learned about it, and shout out to Isaiah, he gave me a call and he told me about the program. And you know me, I gave him the business. I asked all my questions, all the ducks in a row, but it panned out and it checked out. And it was definitely a situation where I was like, hey, I don't have anything necessary to lose. I want to shift. I want to change. Why not go this way? So I interviewed. I actually was living in California when I interviewed. I flew into Seattle, Washington to interview. I got the approval and acceptance, I think, in like 2 days. And they said, hey, if you want to do this program, I need you to be in Seattle in 2 weeks, because I was at the age limit where if I didn't do it, I would miss out. So I picked up and packed up my car and moved out of my apartment in 2 weeks to do the Europe program. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's so powerful, so beautiful, such a interesting story because shout out to Isaiah Sneed, my former teammate, and the interesting part is that I was actually right there next to Isaiah when you guys were talking on the phone.
Oh, wow. I
And
know that.
yeah, I was right there, and I remember when he picked up and he called you, and just sort of having the conversation with Isaiah. He was really high on you, and really making sure that we can do whatever we could in the recruitment team to make sure that we get you in, especially during in that time, because for those individuals, those 8 opportunity youth as referred to, 18 to 24 years old, who are really sort of in this space in life in terms of wanting to do better for yourself, but not necessarily knowing the right path to it. They oftentimes say that path to greatness is not one that's paved with bricks, but more so with cobblestones. It's shaky. So having any level of guidance, I think, is very important. So for you being able to have that insight and see that there's something that was bigger for you on the tail end of the opportunity, and actually taking that step forward, and it's one thing to know that there's something that's out there. It's another thing to be proactive and not reactive. So kudos to you for that. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your experience. But now I want to sort of shift a little bit into really, what you're sort of doing right now in your current present day career. You're doing, so many amazing things. And I say, it's only in due time in which you'll have your own executive assistant. I know that's forthcoming. But as you sort of reflect and you think about where you are currently in your professional career, and I want to start by asking you, what has been the most challenging or difficult aspect about working professionally, especially in corporate spaces, being that you're at Microsoft?
Yes. Jump in. That I love that question, because I think that we need to shine light on that more so often, because it's not a simple question, because you're asking me, what's some of the most difficult aspects of working in corporate and being a professional in a day and age, and in most companies where there's not a lot of people that look like me. So we can start there. I think top 2 would definitely be, some of the most difficult things would be being the first. And when I say that, I mean, I naturally put a lot of pressure on myself. That's just who I am. It's in my bones. It's how I was raised. But there's also this battle of, when you are one of the first in your family, one of the first in your friend groups, and then let's just talk about the culture. We are extremely outnumbered when we think about, at scale, our presence in corporate America. So coming into a corporate environment situation, a huge company like Microsoft, with a background that I had, it was extremely hard to navigate. And my family has been my earliest teachers. I love them dearly, but no one's in corporate America. So at a certain extent, as much as you love them, as much as they can pray for you and be there for you, there's only so much they can help you with in that realm. So I was really going in blind, except for the Europe community that I had built up. And then, I was, trying to find mentors along the way. So definitely one would have been learning to navigate the unknown. And then, something that I still deal with, but was definitely one of the bigger things, is being one of the first that look like me. There's a pressure when you are Black in corporate America. You got, there's that saying, you got to be 10 times as good to get just as much, right?
Right.
So when you got to be 10 times as good to get just as much, one, and you're dealing with the fact that you're one of maybe five, and not just your team, but your organization, oh, you got to be on point every day. And you would think that's the expectation for everyone, but there's a certain pressure that comes with being the first. And no, I'm not the first person in corporate America, but oftentimes when you don't see yourself and you can go weeks without seeing another Black coworker, it feels like that. So that was definitely some of the hardest things for me, being early in career, being young, being a woman, and being a Black woman at that, entering into the corporate space. And it's something that I am extremely committed to, and I have a supportive team that encourages me to address. And thankfully, I have somewhat of that space and trust to address some of those issues.
Powerful, so powerful. And you sort of spoke to it. What seemed that was very reoccurring that came up was sort of being the first. And that means you're a trailblazer, right? And so when you think about, being the first, and I really want, to sort of, maybe steer in that direction a little bit and really expand upon it, because now we have the first African-American vice president, woman, right? And Kamala Harris. And even when we think about even locally here in the state of Washington, we think about Carmen Best, the first African-American police chief in Seattle history, and a woman who's from Tacoma, Washington, who went to Lincoln High School, and rose from the ranks, for 30 years to elevate into that level. And during the uprising and the upheaval here in Seattle, she was placed in this position in which, her being a representation for the police department in Seattle and being an African-American woman, and not necessarily having the autonomy or the freedom to navigate or move the ways in which she wanted to, there was moments in which she would say to the media directly, "My hands are tied." And then the feedback would often return to her, like, "What are you doing as the lead of this department?" So she's sort of in this stuck in between this rock and a hard place. And, sort of for you in these spaces, being that, being that first, being that trailblazer, and oftentimes having to decode or to, re-message not only what you're doing, but the history and experience in the life that you live. How do you handle that gravitas, right? How do you find support on a daily basis? Who do you talk to? How do you sort of just exist in this space?
Yeah. How do I exist in a space that systemically probably wasn't built for me to be in? That is a great question. And I'm still figuring it out. But what I can tell you is I lean heavily on my mentors and my family and people around me to keep me grounded. That's one. Because regardless of me checking in, checking out, I'm Brianna, and I have to stay true to Brianna, because the only way I will survive in corporate America, forget, the politics, all that. The only way I will survive in corporate America is if I stay true to myself. I can't do the political games. That's not me. So it's very hard, but I have to lean in on my family and the people that know Bri. But outside of that, also, like I said, mentorship is really important. But one thing I wanna say is, me being a Black woman, it's a known fact. Black women are extremely, I would say, over mentored. I feel like we have a lot of mentors, but there's not a lot of advocacy for us to be in those leadership positions. There's not a lot of sponsorship going on for us to advance. There's a lot of people that are willing to, mentor us and tell us how to navigate, but how do I get to the next level? So it was also being intentional about finding and seeking out those people that are going to advocate for me. That I have potential, that I am very good at what I do. Put your money where your mouth is and advocate for me to be in those spaces. So yes, definitely. How do I survive? How do I navigate? It's mentors, it's staying grounded, staying humble, and just staying hungry, honestly.
Absolutely. And to your point, there is, unfortunately, there is this pinnacle or this peak that it does seem that a lot of professionals of color, especially, Black and brown women, sort of reach in their careers, in which, you know, you'll get to the manager, director level, but when it comes to being the president, the CEO, that's where sort of the numbers don't equate. But when you think about education, African American women by statistics are the most educated group of individuals in the United States. Why are they not in the most influential positions of leadership? So thank you for sort of addressing that. And honestly, that leads me perfectly, or leads us perfectly into this next question when it comes to corporate social responsibility. You know, I've been fortunate through my nonprofits, even though I have been in the public sector, I've been very close and aligned with a lot of private, you know, private corporations, whether it was through Europe or whether it's through another nonprofit that I worked at, the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship, where the chairman of the board is the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith. So I have been to Microsoft Executive Conference Room in Redmond a few times, not to humble brag a little bit. But I think that, you know, just being in those spaces, one, is very important. Representation matters, but also authenticity matters. It's not just important to be the Black person in the room. It's important to be who you are as a Black person in the room. So I just want to sort of add that. But when we think about companies and elevating talent, recruiting, giving back to the community, corporate social responsibility, the fact that even the chairman of our board is the president of Microsoft really speaks to the philanthropic aspects of Microsoft as an organization. When I think about certain companies that really are actively promoting the corporate and social good in you know, relation to the profit and the business, you know, the business intelligence side, where do you sort of think, you know, in terms of what companies, you know, one, your company is doing an amazing job, Microsoft, but what do you think the responsibility is for corporate entities who are making these billions of dollars while the people that they are serving are struggling? What do you think about corporate and social responsibility?
Absolutely. Another gem. And I mean, you hit on it beforehand, but you're right. There is a responsibility for these great companies that are making billions of dollars annually to really sit back and reflect and think about their consumers and the communities that these consumers sit in, and what that is and how that reflects, you know. And, you know, when we really get to the roots of it all, it really comes down to, for me, it's brand imaging as well, if we're just going to call a spade a spade. And, you know, it is known that more people are more inclined to work with businesses and corporations that they believe are ethical. Yeah. So it is absolutely within the right of us as consumers to demand more of the companies that we are buying products for. And I think it's well deserved. I think it's the very least that should be happening. And I think it's really important. You talked about all the great efforts that my company, Microsoft, is doing, and I could not agree more. I think it was really important for me, coming from a societal background that somewhat you just touched on, where we didn't have all the resources. There was, you know, there's food deserts. There's a lot of things that, like, I grew up and my family has grown up within, that I absolutely wanted to feel the company that I work within is being proactive and dedicated to addressing. And thankfully, I can say wholeheartedly that my company is one of those companies that are extremely dedicated to it. When we talk about their efforts in global warming, when we think about the efforts that they're looking to do to reduce waste, and we're thinking about, you know, our carbon footprint, extremely dedicated to, you know, the youth, which is also a similar dedication and commitment that I have. You know, we have an annual, we call it the Give campaign, that I'm actively involved with every year, that we rally all of our employees together and we raise millions of dollars. Microsoft match, you know what I mean? So I definitely think that my company gets it, and is committed to it. But to answer your question, I want to see more of it. I know that there's more of it in my company and other companies. And, you know, I really think that us as consumers, we have that right. And I really want us to believe and know we have that right to demand more out of these companies, because, you know, we essentially are making them all that they are. So definitely there is a responsibility, for sure.
Absolutely powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Brianna. I wanted to sort of circle back or double back a little bit to sort of our time at Europe. I always sort of say that Europe was, at least for me, um, one of the most, and I say this, you can see the warmth in my heart, one of the most transformative experiences I had in my career.
Yeah.
It started out by first, the tour of the space by Owen Robinson in the Seattle location. He was just a kind heart, kind soul, and that was my introduction into the program. And, kind of to your point, as you touched on earlier, when you first hear about the program, you're like, this is a scam. How are you paying me to take classes and learn IT, learn, computer, software, development, and you're also giving me soft skills. As when I was a former staff member in Seattle, we had a clothing closet, and as was also the case in Bellevue, in which for students who did not have the means to buy a business suit, they would give, and corporate partners would offer it up. Nordstrom's was a big donor of it, right? These different entities who are supporting this program, and I think about from the top, and that's Gerald Shotavian. Yeah. And, for anyone who's familiar with Europe, when you come into Europe, they tell you about the story of Daniel, right? And Daniel was this young African-American who Gerald knew in inner city of Boston. And, it was just sort of a mentor for him, kind of as you spoke to earlier, and seeing the ways from him coming from, the inner cities of Boston and him as a lawyer on Wall Street saying, what can I do to give back? Well, he created a whole organization called Europe. And just sort of when I think about what it means to elevate talent, to mentor, to really give back corporate and socially, these are ways in which, companies, even if you're not doing it, right, you're connecting with organizations such as a Europe. But you, Brianna, you stay very involved with the program. And last time I saw you, I believe, was at Professional Olympics, and you were the featured speaker. Great speech, by the way. I have it recorded, and you were awesome. But I'm just curious, why do you continue, to stay involved with the program,
Yeah, for sure. Similar to one of the first things we heard, like you said, when we came into the program, is we heard about Gerald and how he started Europe and why he felt so passionate to do so. But we also always hear the slogan or motto, lift as you climb. And that's not something that was new to me in essence, but hearing it positioned like that was new to me. And it's something that we all somewhat felt obligated to do, because like you said, we were within a community that was pouring so much into us. I couldn't imagine myself not doing the same when I got out, especially with all of the opportunities that were provided to me because I got involved with that program and the things that I did afterwards. So yeah, I think it's really important. And like you said, just last year alone, I attended the Professional Olympics. I was asked to come and be a speaker to talk about launching Bri's Busy Bees and the back to school drive we did for Supply to South Seattle. And then also outside of that, like I said, within my own company, I started a mentoring initiative and program for Europe interns that come into at least Microsoft. And what we do is we do peer mentorship. Yeah, we do peer mentorship with some of the identified employees that may not have went through the Europe program, but I think are really great advocates for it and supporters for it. So I've identified them, they do mentoring. And then I also use Europe alum. We have a lot of alum that's in the company, whether they're full-time or vendors, and they know the experience, they know how to navigate those waters. And every month I put on a session, we get together and we talk about how you guys are feeling, what's going on, what advice do you need? How's your workload, work-life balance? We're in a pandemic, just having real conversations because, Europe is such a tight-knit community. When you get into internship, you lose it in a sense. And I wanted people to not experience what I experienced. So I'm really happy about that. It's been going on for about 2 years now. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Thank you for that. And you sort of touched on it in your response, but yourself and also fellow Europe alum Sophia Price, you guys hosted your South Seattle Back to School Drive in partnership with Bri's Busy Bees. And South Seattle, or Supply South Seattle, was an initiative that was aimed at providing school supplies and academic resources. Could you tell me a little bit more about how this came about and really the impact and influence that experience has had on you?
Absolutely, I can. Well, one, I can say that I've always had a heart for the progression and the betterment of my people and my community. That's something that was ingrained in me from day one. Um, my grandmother, who I'm so lucky to have with me, has been a huge um, influence on my life, especially when I was younger, but even more so now as I become my own woman and I have to think about these things. But I learned a lot from her from just watching her. And, my grandma spent majority of her lifetime in South Side Chicago. If you're familiar with it, if you know.
Oh, drill music.
Yeah, exactly. So the South Side, it's no cakewalk, especially coming up in the time that she did. And one could say that, being a Black woman in society, being a mother of 7, she was written off. There was very limited resources, very limited opportunities for a woman of her status back then, but she made it work and she did it. And not only did she persevere, but she thrived and she got much further than, society would expect for her to do. And when I got older, I was able and blessed to have transparent conversations with her. And what we found out is that 100% had to do with her faith, her hard work, but also her community. And if you, again, Southside Chicago, and then just our community, we're very big on, people always say it takes a community to raise a child. And that was something that they did not play about. My grandmother's generation did not play about. My grandma would always joke about, when you were younger, my neighbors, they were able to discipline you and set you straight. And that's something that was important to them because especially when it was so hard, to get a job or to have income, they had to rely on their neighbors. They had to rely on their family to help out around, so that was something that, was very interesting for me to find out. And that's something that I didn't know at the time, but that sense of community was being ingrained in me. And lastly, again, she's such an influence. My grandmother, especially whenever I would get to complaining, because the older generations are always saying, this ain't nothing, but whenever I would get to complaining that I'm so tired or I'm so busy, my grandma would always say, it's not so much how busy you are, but why you're so busy. And then she would go on to say, the bee is praised, but the mosquito is swatted. They're both flying around. They're both labeled busy, but what are they doing? The mosquito's being a menace and the bee is getting to work. And that's really where my motivation came for Bri's Busy. And wholeheartedly, I believe in the future and the investment of our youth. I definitely am always saying the children are our future. And if I can get a chance to get my hands on it and mold them and them, I'm going to do it. So to ask your earlier question, how did Supply South Seattle come about? Or what was really the driving force? It was really simple to me. In 2018, there was a report or a status that 97, again, this is 2018-ish, 97% of Seattle public schools served at least one homeless student, and 71% served more than 10 homeless students in Seattle public schools. Wow. That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. And what I'll say is many people...
By the way, that's not a good thing, y'all. That's not a good thing. We have such a high amount of homeless people in Seattle public schools. Just want to add that.
It's not a good thing. 1 in 10 don't, when you think about the scale of it, someone that's not tapped in, that doesn't sound too alarming. But 1 in 10 students, that could be elementary, that could be middle school, that could be high school students, are dealing with poverty and homelessness. And what a lot of people don't know about me is I myself experienced that and endured, homelessness for a season. So it's very, important to me, and it touches home to me, because even though that chapter in my life got me to where I am and molded me, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So how it came about is I knew that I wanted to impact my community. I knew that I wanted to serve my community. And knowing these facts, knowing these stats, I said, you know what, we're gonna start there. We're gonna start in the school system. That's something that, you know, I'm passionate about. It makes sense. There's a direct and an urgent need for it. Let's do it. And I personally believe shelter, food, and education is a human right. I don't think it's negotiable. So luckily, you know, I had a great group of friends around me. One of those friends was Sophia. I told Sophia about my idea and my plans, and she was gung-ho to get on board. And we did it, and it was amazing. We really wanted to alleviate some of the back to school stresses that come, especially in our community. It is absolutely outrageous if you think about it. And let's not even think about if you have a household of 3+ kids, students, you're racking up a hefty bill. So we ended up getting a grant through Year Up, so that was very helpful. We ended up doing a back to school drive. We had about 50 pre-packed backpacks that we prepared and gave out that day, alongside multiple donations. You were there, Pat. We ended up getting, we walked away with over 16,000 donations. And one thing that I was extremely intentional about and was not going to negotiate about, regardless of how I did it or who I worked with, before we started this, I said, these donations are going to communities that have historically been underserved. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's where this is going, period. And we did that. We identified middle schools, elementary schools, and high schools that, you know, based on statistics, and we looked through the records, that were underserved, under-resourced, and we put our sights on them. And it was absolutely amazing, the outpour that we had from our community, our friends. You know, you were there, all of my friends and family, they were on the grill, passing them out, everybody.
It was a time. Yeah. It was a great time.
It was a family affair. And then, you know, again, the community really, you know, loved on us and was appreciative of it. And we ended up getting highlighted and interviewed by our local news station, King 5. So it was really amazing. But I think what was wild to me is when I was dropping off the donations to the schools, I can't tell you, Pat, how many people said, wow, thank you for seeing us. And I was like, that's so wild to me. But for me, I think it was really important for the people, the schools, whatever the case may be, for them to see someone that looks like them, that identifies the walk, recognizes the struggle, lived through that as well, and for them to see that there's someone like me, who's young, who is a person of color, who is a Black woman, that identifies with the struggle but is committed to addressing it. And most importantly, seeing a group of people, you were there, you as well, you donated. This is the youth. We're young, you know, and we're being the change makers. And that was really the biggest thing that I wanted to get out there, is anybody can do it. And if you see that it's not being done, you can do it, no matter the age, no matter your background or whatever. So that was really great. So unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we weren't able thing on a large scheme like that, but we still, Bri's Busy Bee still did donate to multiple partnering school districts. So that was great. And we'll be back next year. It's definitely a commitment of mine. I'm really excited. We're currently planning for next summer's event. So stay tuned for that. After New Year's, we'll be sharing some more details on that.
That Bri, was this is one of those, like, you got to rewind this 3 or 4 times to like catch just the amount of gems that was dropped in just the last 10 minutes. Like, for real, like, you got to double back and really just take it clip by clip. Brandon, that was fantastic. And I guess this will lead me to my final question. And I really want to set this up appropriately. And this is going to really just be something that's really more introspective. So I want to make sure that I contextualize it.
Sure.
So for me, I always say that I've been sort of fortunate to have made it from the block to the boardroom. And what I mean by that is that I've had homies, friends that I've lost to gun violence, death by auto, suicide, the whole gamut. And just sort of growing up in inner cities and being influenced and being able to say, you know what, I'm going to that's in me because y'all are my people, but I know that there's something that's greater for me.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to sort of elevate throughout your career and do it the legal way, right? Many times I could have been like, man, this isn't working, or they want me to be something I'm not, and I'm sitting here taking crumbs when I can go on the block and make that in 24 hours. But I've opted not to, right? And so when I think about that, going from the block, and I was fortunate to have been appointed to the Seattle University Board of Trustee.
Yes.
Yeah, blessed. And for me to be in that room, like I was dressed like this. Like I didn't go in the board meeting wearing a suit and tie, trying to impress the peers. But I looked across the table and go, there's one thing that's dominated me. I look across the room and you can see it's a boardroom. Literally, it's a board table, and you see the white men who sit in the main side, and then on the other side you have the women, white women, and then white men. But there's no black men or no black women, except me and another gentleman. But I remember one time I spoke up, and there was a conversation around recruitment, right? College admissions, and knowing that, colleges, universities are really struggling with trying to, convey or communicate why a student or young adult should invest tuition into college in the year of 2019 or 2020, right? Now you think about, it's a pandemic where people are literally at home. Mm-hmm. Why are you going to pay $10,000? That's if you're in state, right? We're not even thinking about if you're private or you're out of state. Yeah. And these board members, right? These are people who assume fiduciary responsibilities. And if you don't know fiduciary responsibility, when you think about systemic change, it's the board members. Even the nonprofit, the executive director reports to the board. Yep. The executive director is the one who's responsible for the program.
Absolutely.
But they don't create the program. And if you don't get to that board level, you're not even aware that this is where the systemic and institutional change lies. So when I was in that room and they were speaking about students as if they were numbers and data and metrics, it rubbed me the wrong way. So I was like, you can't sell me college. I work for other programs like Year Up, where they're not paying tuition, they're getting paid. They're getting tutorship, they're getting tutelage, and they're getting an opportunity. Here, students in universities and colleges, you don't know $40,000, no internship, can't find a job. Yeah. And colleges are selling university, and it's happening on the board level. And I got in that room and I said, man, this is the history of America. And I had to think about this, the history of America. I go, when you think about who built this country, it was people who look like you and I.
Hey.
Native Americans did not give away this land on a handshake agreement. They had bows and arrows. The white man had ammunitions. You think about New England, Massachusetts. When the Puritans settled in the 1600s, they left England because they were too extreme. And you wonder why people in Boston and the New England area are so damn racist.
I love to hear it.
This is just history. This is not me. This is not conjecture. These are facts.
And I encourage everyone listening to go out. If this seems unheard of, if this seems radical, if this seems not true, I encourage you to go look it up, because this is your history of your homeland, for sure.
It wasn't taught, Bri. And it took me going to the United States Deep South and really learning about the civil rights movement, larger than just the Martin Luther King and the Rosa Parks. When you think about the Freedom Riders, you think about Fannie Lou Hamer, Diane Nash, you think about the Nashville sit-ins. They did not wake up one day and say, we want to change the world with civil rights. Even the most historic moment about the civil rights is the Selma marches, Bloody Sunday, John Lewis standing right there front and center.
I was just going to say John Lewis.
I was there. I had the opportunity. I was there at the 50th anniversary, and it was this interesting moment in which we're crossing the Edmonds-Pettus Bridge, and I look to my right, and I see this gentleman. He's short. He's wearing a red ball cap, and he's scraggly faced black man. And I look over to my two friends, and I go, "Yo, I think that's Dick Gregory." If you don't know Dick Gregory, that man is a historic legend. Passed away recently. And now he's like maybe 5-10 feet away from me, he was by himself. He no security, no entourage, and I had to turn to him, and I kind of tapped him. I said, "Excuse me, sir." I said, are you Dick Gregory? And he looked at me, he smiled, he goes, yeah. And then the person next to me overheard me talking to him and said, is that Dick Gregory? And he just like, and then they asked him for a photo. He's just like, yeah, if you keep walking. I was like, man, that's Dick Gregory. He's like, you're not gonna. I was like, he's like, I remember this time 60 years ago. I'm not here for a photo op.
Yeah.
I'm here to celebrate history and just being in that moment. So I mean, it's a very long way to say when I stood up in the board meeting, I go, you have no clue on what it took for me to get into this meeting right here that you're judging me in. I'm 29 years old as a Black man in America. You're in your 70s and we're in this having the same conversation.
Yeah.
Imagine what life was like if I didn't have to go through all the same things, all the shit that I did.
Yeah.
And I had your life. How much further I would be.
Yeah.
So the question that I have, when you think about identity, right, and professional decorum, right, being a professional, shaking hands firmly, distorting your voice or talking a way in which you don't talk to your homies, your friends like. You change your name from Deshaun to Sean, right?
Yeah.
We think about industry norms as a Black woman yourself who's navigating these spaces. Brianna, are identity politics real? And if so, how do you identify or how do I navigate these terrains?
Woo! It took a minute for us to get there, but I'm so glad you took the route less traveled and you set that up, because that's context that is needed. And I'm a storyteller and I love it. So first of all, thank you. And again, amazing, amazing and necessary question. Our is it real? Absolutely. Absolutely it's real. And you just touched on some of the biggest evidence of that. We look about, you talked about the boardroom scenario and all that, and it's real. I talked earlier about being the first, and that sense of pressure, sometimes guilt, and questioning of oneself, what that comes with being the first. But what a lot of people don't talk about is the microaggressions that we experience in these environments, the pressure to conform, the unspoken, but you know what it is, expectation for you to, one, show up and be 10 times better, perform, drive impact, but also this conflicting internal battle of, when I come into this environment, can I be my true authentic self? And if I am one of those who are bold enough to do so, will I be celebrated? Will I be recognized? Or will I be met with, overarching eyebrows and, can I touch your hair? Your hair is drastically longer today. How did you do that? How often do you wash your hair? And that's just one example of one of the things, and I'm going to speak specifically towards the journey of me being a Black woman in these environments that I have had to endure. And it's not just me, because me and my girlfriends that are in the similar corporate environments, we joke and we cry and we question about the same experiences. So if I'm having an experience, the same experience that 5 of my other girlfriends in different companies and different roles are having, this isn't, yes, it's real. It's very real. And Pat, I'm so happy that you have always been, and that's one of the things that I have loved about you and I respect about you. You have, yes, you're outspoken, but you are calculated and you always bring the facts. And if you're going to speak on something, we know you know. I joke around and call Pat the trusted advisor, because Pat's going to speak on something, I know that he's done his research, and that's reassuring. So I wanted to say that. But I also wanted to say, Pat, that's why mentorship and having a tribe is so important. And I know we didn't really dive into it, the importance of mentorship, or why I'm so big on it, but I want to first say I am everything. We talk about identity and we talk about how we battle with it and how I navigate this identity crisis. Let me first say, everything that I am today, everything that I aspire to be, is because of a Black woman. I just want to start there. That's first, that's last, that's everything in between. It
Absolutely.
was extremely important for me. And I recognized early in life that I felt the most safe, secure, celebrated, intelligent, beautiful, welcomed when I was around women, specifically Black women. And that is something that we shouldn't have to second guess and worry about when we go in to work to provide for our families. Because at the end of the day, that's the only reason we do this, to provide for our families. That's the knee jerk reaction. That's the cause. Now there might be some people, I could say I'm the same. I'm extremely motivated. I'm ambitious, and I want to get as far as I can go. But at the end of the day, my biggest driving force is to provide for my family. And the last
Mhm.
thing that any of us should have to worry about or debate about is how we show up. And do we have to alter our personal beliefs, our integrity, who we are at our core, how we look, how we are, our God-given presentation? We shouldn't have to um, alter that. It shouldn't be a debate. No one should make me feel that way. And then the last thing I'll say is, again, I loved the boardroom analogy. Actually, it wasn't even an analogy. That's really what happened. And I can't tell you how real that is, because we talked about corporate social responsibility.
Right.
And one of the things that also play into that, and it's crazy, all your questions tie together, but when we think about these corporations making these hefty, large commitments and decisions that are going to impact millions, and you mean to tell me out of those hundred thousands, millions of people, you probably only have one or two at that representation at the table? And that's me being generous.
That's honest.
So, yes, again, I'm going to keep saying it. It is a problem, it is real. What we do to address it, I don't have a concrete answer for you. I
No.
think one,
Right.
I think one, we have to talk about it. We have to continue to talk about it. We have to not necessarily accept it, but we have to recognize it. And we gotta hold people to the fire and make people really, really, really put their money and their investments and their time where their mouth is. So yes, it's real, Pat. That's a long-winded way to say it's real.
No, that was so needed, so necessary, and so important, and so reflective, and wow. When I think about really even just the last 20, 30, like I have chills right now, Bri. Like I'm just like sitting here, like and this is for those who are watching, those who are listening. I think that these are the conversations that are the most important, right? We can discuss and we can talk about pop culture, and it's important to stay current. And it's not to necessarily denigrate and to say if you follow what's happening in current pop culture that you're not, that you're not important. But there's something that's more important when we think about ownership, when we think about the tail end of things. These are the conversations that we don't get to see, and I've fortunately been privileged to attend a number of keynotes, and I'm sure I'll attend a number of yours moving forward, Brianna. And one thing I learned about keynotes versus a guest speaker, that a keynote is someone who's distinguished within their professional field or has a level of expertise or knowledge that makes them an expert. A guest, speaker is someone who may be able to speak to something, but is more so there for the name or for the cachet.
Yeah.
So when I think about a keynote, and I've attended a number of keynotes, from the Brad Smiths, to the Michael Eric Dyson's, which is the best keynote speaker that I've ever heard in my life, right, Dr. Dyson. But one thing that I realized in those moments of keynotes is that these were things that these individuals accomplished. They don't speak; they speak from history, right? I want to learn from somebody who I've seen do it. I
Yeah.
don't want to be fed something that sounds good in theory, but it hasn't been done in actual practice. And the
Yeah.
fact that you are living the thing that you're speaking, and you are doing it not necessarily for the adulation, you're doing it for the sincerity, but for those who are gracious, you've been able to exude and receive a level of gratitude, not only for myself but from all those who have been connected to you throughout your career and your life. So thank you for the work that you do, and I just want to really open up the floor. If you have any maybe last things that you want to say to anyone, the floor is yours.
Yeah, man, Pat, I don't have much, but again, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you so much for this
Close.
opportunity. Um, one, for providing a platform for progressive, free thinking individuals. And I'm a huge fan. I've always been a fan. I'm always going to be a fan. And these conversations are so necessary. These diverse perspectives are so necessary. And you're talking about real life. You're talking about, people's personal walks. So I can't thank you enough. Whatever it is that I can do, I will continue to do. But this is absolutely amazing, and I know that this is just the start. And I personally have a little bit of an insider scoop, so I know there's a lot of greatness to come. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely.
Yes, but on a personal front, I really just want to say and encourage, and I guess a call to action would be for people to get involved, people to get busy.
Absolutely.
We're in a really conflicting and hard time right now. Our nation, our communities, our family, we're hurting. And more than ever, we need people to rally around that and get involved. So, do I have anything really? I guess my biggest thing is whatever you decide to choose, whatever organization or cause is important to you, get involved. Roll your sleeves up. Get involved. I know it's hard. We're definitely in a pandemic, so I want people to be responsible. But whether that be, reading up on things, reading is fundamental. Do your research, donations. When it's right, being in person and donating your time, your resources, your energy, um, it's important. And last, I will say, I already kind of touched on it earlier, but I am the founder of Bri's Busy Bees. We are a community outreach, scholarship, mentorship, nonprofit organization that is committed to serving the underserved youth. 2020 has been a crazy year, but we're really excited to gear it for 2021. We're currently planning with my team what that's going to look like. We have two amazing that we're looking to kick off. So stay tuned for that. You guys can check us out on Instagram. Our social media handle is at Bri's Busy Bees. That's BRI Busy Bees, BEES. And please check us out. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I would love to hear from you guys. And again, Pat, thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And to those of you who are watching, who are listening, thank you. Know yourself, know others, love yourself, love others. Peace, love, and respect.
Yes.
Stand pat. Cool. All right.